My problem is that, while you were sleeping is just so cliche and basic, and it might worsen the stereotype that all K dramas are tropey, shallow, and just convenient, right? Overly convenient. It's a decent start. It wouldn't be the worst K drama to start with, but we can do better and recommend better shows that don't play to that stereotype. Good morning, good evening, and good day. I'm Francine, and I really love K dramas. You're listening to Dramabuds, a Globe Studios podcast. So, hello everyone. Welcome back to Dramabuds Season 2. Today, I am celebrating a milestone, an achievement in my K drama watching life. I don't know. I have finally finished While You Were Sleeping, the final show in my watch list, written by Park Hye Ryun. I've done it. I've watched enough of this writer's work to finally have an informed opinion on what I feel about her writing in general. I left While You Were Sleeping last because everyone says it's the best. And I wanted to test that. Like, okay, you say it's the best. I'll test that by watching everything else that came before and after it to really see if, I've seen everything. I could say it's the best or it's the worst or it's just fine. And spoiler alert on what I'm going to be saying today. Yeah, it's objectively the best, right? Very polished. Okay. But I still have the same issues here as I did in other PHR works. Uh, Today is less of a recap, just a little bit of it, because it's a second chances episode. It's not so much a reviews, recaps, and rants, though there is a lot of ranting. So yeah, a bit of recap, and then we move on to my full PHR comparison throwdown showdown. You may ask, why compare this to the other shows? Why do you have to pit shows against each other instead of appreciating them on their own? Why can't you just appreciate While You Were Sleeping on its own? And to that I say, it is literally impossible when you've watched them all and you see all the similarities. Like, it doesn't even get a separate section for my thoughts on it as a standalone work. Because it was impossible for me to see While You Were Sleeping as a separate work from all the other PHRK dramas. Like, yeah, it gets a little bit of credit for being the most polished, but it also gets minus points for being the third in a series. And, PHR has all the practice she needs to make this her best work in that series. So, yeah, let's do it. Spoiler warnings for While You Were Sleeping, I Hear Your Voice, Pinocchio, and Startup. So, what's the plot of the show? It's about a prosecutor and a reporter who have dreams that show them the possible future, and they try to change things to save each other's lives and the lives of the people around them. So noble. Okay. Plot and characters. First, we have Nam Hongju, played by Suzy. So she is currently living with her mom and helping her run her barbecue restaurant. She regularly has dreams about terrible things happening to people, though she doesn't know who they are and when it's going to happen. One time she had a dream about dying in her reporter uniform, so she took a leave of absence from her job to avoid that from happening, because she can't die in her reporter uniform. She's not a reporter. And then she had another dream that her mother died and she had long hair then, so she cut her hair to prevent that dream from happening. Makes sense, I guess. She's always tried to change other people's fate, but she always failed. So, it's like the feeling of she's helpless to these dreams. Even when she sees it happening or right before it happens, like, she can't do anything about it. She has that fear. Then one day she has a dream about Jung Jae-chan, played by Jong Suk, saving her. And then soon after that, he moves into the house that's right in front of theirs. And then they discover that Jae-chan also has dreams about her and he ends up saving her and Han Woo-tak, played by Jung Hae-in, from a car accident. And then they all team up together to find out the mystery behind their dreams and prevent these horrible things from happening. Yay! Next, we have Jung Jae-chan, played by Lee Jong-suk. He's a new prosecutor who moves into the house in front of Hongju's. And he was rebellious as a kid, so his dad hired a tutor, Lee Yu-bom, played by Lee Sang-yob, who faked Jae-chan's grades to get a raise and then left Jae-chan to get caught by the police when they caused a motorcycle accident. And then years later, they meet again when Jae-chan starts working at Yu-bom's previous office. What do you call that? Prosecutor district. I don't know. As a prosecutor, Yu-bom used to be a prosecutor there, but now he's a lawyer at a big firm. Jae-chan ends up having this dream about Hongju dying months later. So he prevents it from happening and saves her life, right, with a car accident. And then they start dreaming about the cases that Jae-chan is handling. The three of them, actually. Hongju, Jae-chan, and Woo-tak. And then they find ways to help Jae-chan discover the truth and get the right verdict. Honestly, I usually write with my recaps for these shows. I go through each of the characters and then their characterization and then some of the plot stuff that they go through just to, to show you where their character is headed, like their journey as a character. But honestly, I can't say much about their characters here. It's like, I realized that all of this is plot. Mostly from the pilot, to be honest. It's a great pilot. A lot happens. But then if I think of, what is it really that they're internally dealing with? I guess they're dealing with, like, fearing the future and then taking control of their lives, even if, fate is against them, their dreams are against them. And then they're also dealing with some childhood trauma and guilt. But once again, that's also tied to the plot in a very tied to the plot way. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I just can't say much about their characterization. I can say a little bit about it, but we'll go through that later. So I feel like I have to talk about, okay, what was your first experience watching this show? Why is this a second chances episode? So my first watched while you were sleeping, or tried to watch it around the time that Startup was airing. Because, I remember we were getting mad at the show for, just being a mess. And then my sister said, she watched the first episode of While You Were Sleeping and it was really good. Like, the way Startup's pilot was really good, While You Were Sleeping started out really, really well. And, okay, we gave it a chance, just to see. And yeah, it was a great pilot. But I was like, I don't really want to see Suzy every day and then see her even more during the weekends when Startup was airing. Like, I don't want to put myself through that because she kind of acts so similarly that I just don't. I don't. And so I said, you know what, seems nice, but I'll table it. I'll shelf it for now. It seems nice, but not now. And then, Startup ended. What a mess that became. And then months passed. I watched a lot of great shows. Then I decided, you know what? I will go through the journey of watching all of PHR's previous works. Well, not all, but a lot of them. And then I will have an informed opinion on While You Were Sleeping. So I did. I watched Pinocchio, I Hear Your Voice, and now this. And yeah, as I mentioned in the intro, it's impossible for me to see it as a separate, standalone work of its own merit. Okay, it was just so difficult. So now, I'm going to talk about the Park Hye Ryun cinematic universe. Because honestly, these shows are so similar to each other. And I've also talked about this in my Formulaic K-dramas episode. At the time, I only watched Startup and Pinocchio, right? My opinion was not complete back there, but you know what? Everything I said in the formulaic K-dramas episode. I stand by that. I was right. I'm gonna repeat some of those points here because, yeah, it really is that similar. Okay, so starting with While You Were Sleeping, like, what is this show similarities, I guess, with all the other PHR shows? Uh, While You Were Sleeping mixed the legal aspect of I Hear Your Voice and the media aspect of Pinocchio. Which, once again, wow, PHR, you've done so well mixing those two things together, especially after getting so much practice, two whole shows worth of practice. But whatever. I really like the media aspect in Pinocchio because it went deep into their moral responsibilities, like the duty of the media to society, while it was kind of just a plot device in While You Were Sleeping. Like, it wasn't really the setting that drove their conflicts. It was more of like, Hongju is a reporter. Yes. So that's why she has the right to get up in people's business about, legal cases and whatnot. Okay. Uh then again, it's an unfair comparison because, yeah, I mentioned it. While You Were Sleeping isn't about the reporters and the media. It's a plot device. Pinocchio focuses on the media, on reporters, and it goes deep into it. That's to be expected. I don't really hold that against While You Were Sleeping all that much. Now, on the legal drama side of things, I'd say While You Were Sleeping and I Hear Your Voice are equally dramatic, but compelling enough to keep the story going. I think that's why I like legal dramas in general because, they have to fabricate this kind of drama. Sometimes it goes overboard, like these cases are too insane and I can't take it seriously. But sometimes it's like, right amount of drama. Okay, I have a bias for I Hear Your Voice because I really liked Jang Ye-sung, played by Lee Bo-young. I really liked her character. I will talk a lot about her later. And I like her a lot more than Jong Jae-chan of While You Were Sleeping. And also, since I Hear Your Voice is focused on the legal aspect, the setting is mostly about Jang Ye-sung's, public defender job. It discusses the moral responsibilities of these defense lawyers, their dilemmas and all that, which is an unfair comparison to While You Were Sleeping, where, it drives the plot mostly, the legal cases, but it's also mixing a lot of the fantasy and the crime stuff, and then there's the reporter stuff. Like, it's a lot of things. In a way, While You Were Sleeping is the tightest though. Like, it has a lot of things and it keeps it tight and it's very polished. Like, the others have their workplace struggles and then the moral dilemmas of that struggle, and then this big bad or this mystery it honestly feels like an afterthought. Like, the villain part feels like an afterthought and it could have been dropped. Honestly, there's enough going on that you don't necessarily need to have this looming big bad, but then that would completely change the vibe of the show and then reveal more flaws about the characters because, they don't have this very deadly, serious entity or these stakes pushing them to go along. More on that later. While You Were Sleeping, however, ties all of those together into the workplace struggles, into the cases that Jae-chan goes through, and focuses more on the fantasy aspect, on the dreams. Like, in I Hear Your Voice and Pinocchio, like, okay, I Hear Your Voice, his mind reading thing, it just is what it is. Right? He knows he can read minds by looking into people's eyes. Period. That's it. He doesn't try to explore, why did this happen to me? Like, why did it have to be me? What does reading people's minds even mean? He didn't even think about that. It's just, he was born with it. In Pinocchio, like the Pinocchio syndrome where some people hiccup if they lie. Like, it just is what it is. Everyone knows about it. It is an established reality in this universe. So, they didn't explore the fantasy aspect as much. It just is what it is. in While You Were Sleeping, it's a mystery to them, right? It's what causes them to live their lives in fear or to do certain things to help other people. So it's much more explored there and much more central to the plot. Okay, let's start comparing individual aspects of the shows. All four of the shows. I didn't mention Startup as much in that previous segment because it's a bit different. I'll get to that later. Okay, female leads. Let's compare the four female leads. I'd say my top is I Hear Your Voice, Jang Ye-sung played by Lee Bo-young, and then Nam Hong-ju played by Suzy in While You Were Sleeping, and then maybe So Dal-mi played by Suzy in Startup, and then Choi In-ha played by Park Shin-ye in Pinocchio. Let's start from the top. The best. Let's start with the best. I really, really loved Lee Bo-young's performance as Lawyer Jang. I really just felt like she wasn't as, cookie cutter, nice, perfect, always doing the right things for the right reasons, the way the others kind of were. Especially While You Were Sleeping. Especially Nam Hong-ju. Like, I don't know, always just doing the right thing. Whatever. By the end, when, the big bad was finally like all in, this is his last hurrah. By the end, she was kind of a damsel in distress when her life was literally in danger. But I will accept it because this is the male lead's only chance to actually show what he's been preparing for the entire show. It's like he's been useless the entire time, but now he gets to show that, yeah, he wants to be her protector. Go do what you have to do because it's literally all you can do. More on his character later. Okay, back to Lawyer Chang. You'd say that she's not that good of a person, but like given how everyone that came after her, which once again, she was the first one, 2013, the rest were 2015, 17, and 2020. She's the first in this line. Everyone that came after her is kind of one note, but they're portrayed as quirky and spunky just to say that they're not perfect. But they kind of are. Like, they don't really have anything internal to deal with, I don't know, aside from fear or self-doubt. Like, Homegirl does not have much self-doubt or fear. She is just kind of she's just kind of greedy and doesn't have great morals. But I love her. Okay, I love her for that because I felt like that's more realistic. Really, it just was in a show that's as crazy as this. Yeah, I like that aspect of her. She is the exact template for everyone after, especially Dalmi. Dalmi is most similar to Jang Ye-sung from I Hear Your Voice. I swear she is. Okay, next female lead we have Hongju from While You Were Sleeping. She was okay. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her either. Acting wise, I have to say it. Acting wise, Suzy here, there were moments when I just had to laugh because she really had no urgency in her eyes, in her face, in her voice when she was literally being chased by a killer with a knife. Or, when others were in danger around her, like when Jae-chan got shot right in front of her, like, where's the urgency, sis? Where is the urgency? I don't even, on the other, on the more like day-to-day acting, not so emotional, I don't even want to fault her for acting so similarly as like Hongju and Dalmi. Because, Park Hye Ryun just writes the same female character in varying situations with like very similar mannerisms and quirks, right? I'm not gonna blame her for, portraying the same character again with just a few differences. I blame her maybe for taking the role, but whatever. Okay. Next, okay, we have Dalmi now. Dalmi from Startup. My main issue with her has always been that she was a Mary Sue. And I don't want to get into this as much. Like, you can listen to my 2-hour episode on Startup or my Formulaic K-Dramas episode. But she's a Mary Sue, right? She can do no wrong. Everything goes right around her. Or when things go wrong, like, they just fall apart when she does one thing. Like, okay, becoming a CEO. She magically became a CEO because of this pretty random system, random activity in the hackathon event. It felt like an icebreaker more of, but apparently she's a CEO now. And all the problems that they face instantly just fall apart when she does something, or when it's solved by Dosan or by Jipyong. Honestly, sometimes I don't really think that she solves anything, that it's just those two or anyone else fixing things for her. And I felt like there were no stakes in her journey. Only her pride was on the line. Which could be, because there are no stakes in the entire story of the show. Honestly, not just her. She's not the only problem here. Anyway, lastly, we have Choi In-ha from Pinocchio, who is just a plain damsel in distress. It's like, for most of the show, I don't really know if she did much. Kind of similar to, not like Dalmi. No. Like, okay, here's my problem with Choi In-ha, really. She had the fantasy aspect, right? She had the Pinocchio syndrome. But she was a much weaker character than Dalpo. I mean, I felt like she was pitiful. I pitied her at some points, especially with her relationship with her mom, and like not being accepted as a reporter immediately when she's the one that's been working to study for it for so long, while Dalpo just gets taken because, who knows. But then again, like, her fantasy aspect, her Pinocchio syndrome prevented her from becoming a good reporter in the panelists' eyes. So it kind of made sense, I guess. But anyway, I pitied her, yeah. But then that also just intensified the damsel in distress feelings, right? And honest to God, Park Shin-ye's performance did not help in making her not feel like a damsel in distress. It's like, I'm sorry to her fans, but like, at that time in her career, 2015 and before that, like, that was kind of the role she was stuck with, right? The heirs, that was the era in her career, and it just did not help, right? Her acting of that role did not help in the damsel in distress feelings. That's all I'll say about that. Let's go to I titled this as the Jong Suk Showdown. Because honestly, I'm only going to focus on the 3 Jong Suk shows and their male leads. Because honestly, I did not give Nam Do-san of Startup, played by Nam Joo-hyuk, a chance. I didn't give him a chance. And I feel like I didn't give him as much thought as I gave Dalmi thought in Startup. What little thought I gave Dalmi, I could not give to Dosan at the time. And I won't be rewatching that show. I'm not gonna do that to myself. So my favorite Lee Jong-suk would be Choi Dalpo from Pinocchio, and then Jung Jae-chan from While You Were Sleeping, and then Park Soo-ha from I Hear Your Voice. Let's start with the bottom, right? Because it's interesting, right? How similar it is to Pinocchio. Park Soo-ha got the fantasy aspect. He can read people's minds, Yesung can't. But he had no other story aside from hanging around Yesung and being in love with her and wanting to protect her from, the revenge killer coming after them. And then he had no family, 2 friends that didn't get a lot of screen time, weren't that interesting. And, while she had the job tied to the flow of the story, the plot of the story. She had the moral dilemmas. She had all the other characters that were related to her in some way. Suha, in comparison, was just nothing, really. Next on the list is Jae-chan. So similar to Hongju, I didn't love Jae-chan, but I didn't hate him either. I think he's so boring to me Because although he has things going on with him and around him, he wasn't nearly as interesting, as compelling as I thought he would be. Right? Like he's just like Hongju, a plot vehicle dealing with things around him. And when he dropped like the goofy, dumb image and became like a serious, regular character, he became boring. I'm not saying he should have been like goofy and stupid the entire time, but it just felt like, okay, well, now that I can't call him super like materialistic and wacky, what can I say about him? He does things. He is a prosecutor. He's a brother. He is new to the prosecutor's office. He does things essentially, but I couldn't say anything like he is this. I couldn't even say he's responsible, he's kind, he's so tied to his duty that he's unable to do anything else aside from work. I can't say anything like that about him. I don't really know his personality, which can be said about all of them, to be honest. It doesn't help that they're all played by Lee Jong Suk, so it's like he's playing a similar role 3 times in varying degrees of, darkness and seriousness. I don't know. My favorite of the Lee Jong Suks is Choi Dal-po from Pinocchio. I felt like I felt like he was elevated as a character because of how annoyed I was by Inha. Right? Like the only thing I felt for Inha was apathy and pity. But not like, oh, I root for you, you're the best girl. I don't know, never felt that way for her. For him, it was like, he's interesting. He had a larger world and social circle than Suha from I Hear Your Voice. I think they fixed that. I think they realized we can't just make one person not have anything going on around them aside from loving the female lead. That's good. So that, and then he had a nice story with his adoptive father here, even if it's ridiculous, like the story with that grandpa adopting this child that reminded him of his son that died years and years ago, and believes that this is his son, that he's still alive even if it's the same age as his grandchild. You know what, it's a little crazy, but I'll let it slide, it's fine. And Choi Dal-po is not a cookie cutter nice guy like Jae-chan. Like, I feel like he's a little more dark. He's darker. He has a little more depth than that. And I do like how his overly melodramatic backstory was tied to the overall moral of the story. That, the media has a responsibility in how they shape the public's view on a person, on a situation. I like that. It all came back to that. And Choi Dal-po wasn't going after a killer out for revenge or dealing with a fantasy aspect that he didn't understand. In a way, he was kind of the dangerous, unpredictable person who was out to get revenge. But then he recognized that, he could be a good reporter and do the duty that the reporter who endangered his family, who slandered his father when he died, he could do better than that, even if he despised reporters because of that incident. So, see, he's a little more interesting. I like a good moral dilemma, I feel like it's the bare minimum, but it does a lot. So, we've discussed the leads. Let's go to the main couple. Not romantic first, just their dynamic as 2 characters. As you can see in I Hear Your Voice and Pinocchio, one of the leads got the fantasy aspect and the other didn't. But the less quote-unquote special one was more compelling to me. And then in While You Were Sleeping, they both got the fantasy thing, so they're equals on that aspect, but they're also equally boring. It's like, I feel like Park Hye Ryun thinks when you get the fantasy aspect, that's your personality. You can be a little spunky, a little quirky, a nice guy overall. That's your personality. And you're interesting now because you have the fantasy thing. Okay. Right? Because it's a pattern. I noticed it with three shows that have different plots and different issues to deal with. Okay, let's go to the chemistry, the romance. Chemistry wise, none of them had strong chemistry to me. Mostly because I wasn't sold on the love story in the first place. Like, I don't know why this story has to have love in it, but okay. They all felt a little forced. Like, while you were sleeping was the most contrived for me. You know, it was the most forced to me. Like, after the inciting incident of, Jae Chan saving Hongju's life, like, she immediately started expressing interest in him and forcing her way into his daily routine. Like, oh, I dreamt about him going to this cafe and getting this order every morning, so I'm gonna do that ahead of him so that I can meet him in the bus stop, on the way to work and stuff like that. It's like, why? I'm supposed to find it cute, but if I don't, what am I supposed to? Once again, it's a me thing, not a fan of romance. It felt very unnatural. It just was. Pinocchio next was kind of okay because it was like faux incest, but it wasn't. And they are childhood friends. They did grow up together. I guess that's more okay. I Hear Your Voice. I don't like Nuna romances in general. I Hear Your Voice was not an exception. I did not really care about this, and it was a little gross, and there was really no chemistry. Yeah. And Dodal from Startup. I don't feel like commenting on them. I would say though that the romance is necessary for this story because it's the only way to explain why things happened the way they did. Right? Right? Okay, maybe. But love at first sight, puppy love is not is not high on my list of, you know, romances that are acceptable to me. So, yeah, done with that. And honestly, Dodal is on my list of K-drama couples that will eventually break up. I know they got married, but people can still break up. So that's all I'm gonna say on that. Okay. Let's move on to the most infamous trope for me. This is like PHR's notorious for this, and I'm exhausted. Childhood connections. PHR has made me hate childhood connections so much. Like, their romance is always based on the fact that they were somehow connected in the past. So they're obligated to be attracted to each other and be together somehow. This is not a ranking of how much I like it in the show, but like how acceptable it is, relative to the others. I'd say Pinocchio at the top, then I Hear Your Voice, then While You Were Sleeping. So in Pinocchio, I mentioned it, they literally grew up together. It wasn't as annoyingly convenient as the others. And also, the reporter that misrepresented Dalpo's dad and led to his disgrace and his family separation. The fact that she is Inha's like distant mom separated from her dad is convenient. Yeah, and then she also became their boss. Like, okay, convenient, but it's not too bad. It's okay. In I Hear Your Voice, the childhood connection was the reason why Park Suha was so determined to protect her. And it's also the reason why I hate his character, because he has nothing going on aside from protecting her. While You Were Sleeping was the worst in this aspect. Like, at times, it was like, kind of acceptable. But While You Were Sleeping, it was just too much, okay? It was unnecessarily convoluted. Like, it was okay when the main leads were connected in the past because it's the reason why they had dreams about each other. Okay, cool. But then they added the villain, right? Yubom was connected to Jae Chan's past. It wasn't absolutely necessary because he could have just been, an egotistical, manipulative person without being tied to Jae Chan's childhood. In a way, it was like further characterization, further explanation to his character, because you could see that he's been this way since he was a teenager. But I would not say it's absolutely necessary. But the moment that this show crossed the line was when Jae Chan's investigator was somehow the patrol officer in Jae Chan's dad's old precinct, when Jae Chan was a kid, and he was also the older brother of the soldier who defected and ended up killing the lead's dads, like both of their dads. It was just, see, do you understand how complex that matrix was? It was too much, it was too convoluted, it was too convenient. He could have just been another investigator who was in a difficult position because he helped Yu-bom, who is, the big bad of the show. He helped him, fabricate some evidence, and he felt compelled to right his wrongs without having to be tied to Jae Chan's past. Like, he didn't have to be the older brother of the soldier who defected and killed the leads in their past, and also the man that they saved from dying, and the reason why Jae Chan started to have dreams about Hongju. It didn't have to be like that. I see how PHR tried to tie everything back together. It's a valiant effort, really, but it was too much this time. Too much. We move on to the most infamous, most controversial aspect of Park Hye Ryun's works. The second leads. So, ranking-wise, I would rank Han Ji-pyong from Startup, played by Kim Son-ho, as the best second lead. And then, Lawyer Cha, I forgot his name. Lawyer Cha from I Hear Your Voice, played by Yoon Sang-yun, I think. Yeah, he's the second. Third is Han Woo-tak from While You Were Sleeping, played by Jong Hae-in. And last is the second lead in Pinocchio, played by some guy whose name I don't remember, whose actor I don't remember. I'm so sorry. Okay, let's start with the bottom. Pinocchio. That guy was a creep. Was he not a creep, guys? I don't know. It's like he held on to Inha's mom's old phone and then continued to semi-catfish Inha and read her texts to her mom for years. And then he used that info to kind of find out where she worked and, start working there using his rich boy privilege. And then he became irrelevant to the plot after Dalpo and Inha officially got together. And he even left his job with Inha, which further reduced his relevance to the plot until the very end when he had to take down the big bad. I don't know, he was a creep. He wasn't that important to the plot. Okay. Alright, While You Were Sleeping, Han Woo-tak. He was a nice guy, right? And he actually became real friends with the leads, which is probably why a lot of people like him. He's a really nice guy. He's cute. Yes, Jong Hae-in is cute. Facts only. But to me, he's an okay character, and he got super sidelined in the plot and also the love triangle very, very soon after the leads got together. Right? And similar to Pinocchio's second lead, he only showed up again at the end to bring down the big bad. But personality-wise, I can't really say much about him except he's a nice guy. He's a little, not even that goofy. He's lonely. We can say he's lonely, but he lies about it. He lies a lot. He lies about a lot of things related to himself, actually. Okay, moving on. I Hear Your Voice. My favorite, Lawyer Cha. I love him so much. I love how his character and his work ethic inspired Yesong. I wouldn't know if it's inspired or pressured Yesong to become a better lawyer. And then I love how that broke down her defenses and she started kind of falling for him because of it. And he had a real shot this time. Because, Suha was a teenager, a high school student, and he was not an option in Yesong's mind at the time, even if Suha liked her so much. He had a real shot with Yesong. And I love how, Lawyer Cha and Yesong became a thing very, very briefly. But that fell apart when he took a case that took advantage of his moral compass. Like, should I spoil this? Yeah, I'll spoil it. I even have a full episode on I Hear Your Voice if you're interested, because I really loved his story specifically in this moment. So, Yesong's mom got killed by the murderer out for revenge coming after Suha and Yesong. And he was looking for a defense lawyer, and he came to Lawyer Cha, and at the time Lawyer Cha and Yesong just started dating a bit, and he said, no, I'm not going to take his case, I'm not going to defend him. But of course he can't resist. He listens to the killer's story, and so good. It's like, that he's trying so hard not to side with the killer, but it's in his moral code, in his moral compass, to give people a chance. And honestly, like, the killer story is good. It's pretty convincing, right? And so he can't stop himself. It's his character. They doubled down on how his character and his beliefs wouldn't let him turn this case down, even if it meant hurting Yesong. That stings, but it's so good. It was such a, there's no way to work around this, right? It is in his character to not turn that person down, and it is in her character to want him to do so, right? Not be understanding about it. That's my mother who died. That is the man who killed her. He's been coming after me too. You know this about me. Why don't you just do what I say and not take it? But he can't. Gosh. Sometimes PHR gets me. But yeah, like, that whole situation, it made me accept the breakup. Even if I loved him and hated Suha, like, you know what, there's no bouncing back from this. It's over. Okay. I love how, after this, Lawyer Cha, he even made Suha realize that being a man and being a good protector meant more than just doing it for show, and he had to grow up, like, mature internally and not just be physically strong if he wanted to be taken seriously. And sadly, as most second leads do, he also kind of vanished when his turn in the love triangle was done. And I don't remember him being given something to do to bring the bad guy down. I don't remember, but it's fine. He got a good arc. He was a good character. Okay. And of course, my number one second lead is Han Ji-pyong. He's my favorite. It's like, I won't get into this. I have a 2-hour podcast. Go. But he was given the most character depth and backstory among all the second leads. Like, he even had a better bond with Dalmi's Halmoni, right? Better than Dalmi's relationship with Halmoni. Right? His relationship with Halmoni is the core relationship of the show, not Dodal, right? The first episode focused entirely on Ji Pyong's relationship with Halmoni. Who cares about, Dalmi's whatever with her sister and her mom and her dad? Like, who cares about you? It's Good Boy and Halmoni. It was their show. Okay. Moving on. When you have a second lead, what else do you have? A love triangle. Of course, people cannot coexist without having a love triangle, apparently. I would say the only love triangle, the only real love triangle, where the second lead had a chance was I Hear Your Voice. Because, once again, Lawyer Cha had the chance, he was given the chance, and yet losing Yesong made perfect sense. It was okay. Fine. The other second leads had no real chance, so I didn't even feel bad when the leads got together. Like, Pinocchio, I never heard anything about that second lead. I don't think anyone rooted for him. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But whatever, I've never heard about him. Wutak from While You Were Sleeping. A lot of people liked him so much as a second lead. But I don't think that love triangle was as strong as what people made it seem like it was. Like, he seemed to understand what was going on between them, like between him and Hongju and Jichan, and he never overstepped. Honestly, I'd have loved the show if they all remained friends and became like a real squad instead of, the main couple and the third wheel. Like, it would have made sense if they stayed friends instead of, confusing everything for romantic love. Because they were super cute, the three of them hanging out together, trying to figure things out together. That was enough. Like, when they started amping up this love triangle thing ish, and more of amping up the romantic thing between Hongju and Jechan, that's when, Wutak kind of vanished because he was already losing before it even began. And it sucked because I think they were cuter as three. Yeah. And now we have to talk about the startup love triangle, which was the single worst thing I have ever experienced in my whole K-drama standing life. It was a mess, right? Besides the petty, childish, competitive things they did for laughs, right? Because they had to do it. They had to amp up this love triangle thing by making it wacky. I really hated how they reduced Ji Pyong's character to, Dalmi's savior and the third wheel in the love triangle. And, they made it worse by extending the quote-unquote love triangle to the very end of the show, as if he had a chance even after the time skip. If they ended the love triangle thing in episode 8 and then gave Dodal, proper character and relationship development, and also showed Ji Pyong like being friends and being kinder to himself and others, like, maybe I would find this show uplifting like others did. But instead, we turned the best character in the show to an emotional punching bag. And for what? For why? Yeah. Startup. Ji Pyong. Truly, no justice. He was given so much backstory, a great relationship to begin with, and yet, he was still just the second lead in a love triangle. Moving on. The big bad of each of these shows. Startup is not part of this. Startup did not really have a big bad, I guess. So big bad wise, I'd say the best is While You Were Sleeping, and Then I Hear Your Voice, and then Pinocchio. So in While You Were Sleeping, I firmly believe that Lee Yubong, played by Lee Sang-yob, should have won. He should have gotten away with it. Hongju should have died, and he should have gotten away with it because his plan was pretty smart and he planned things out well enough. Like, he really made sure there's going to be a blackout here. This person's going to, poison Hongju with the IV, and it's going to look like a serial killer. And then I can kill that person and say, it was self-defense. Great plan. Wonderful. But of course, Hongju survived because Jae-chan was conveniently there at the perfect time to, create this parallel on how she saved him back when they were kids. Boo! Yu Bom is the best character in this show. Like, overall, he is. He's egotistical, right? He's a little morally deprived, morally defunct. I don't know. But he's also disgusted by what he's doing. Like, you can see it in his actions that he's not entirely proud of what he's done. He's not a complete sociopath, psychopath. I don't know. I could never fully tell. I couldn't read him. I loved it. He kind of reminds me of Oh Young-suk from Designated Survivor 60 Days, played by Lee Jun-yuk. It's like, I feel like there's so much more to him than what we can see. But the writer chose not to reveal everything because he's meant to be a mysterious character. You're meant to not understand him. Except I could see that more clearly in Designated Survivor. And in here, I'm starting to think like, maybe it's a fluke. Maybe, Park Hye Ryun just wrote one interesting character for the first time. It's not the first time. But like, for this show, it's like she poured all of it into this character. Or maybe it was just a fluke, an accident. It happened. Who knows? Can never get into the mind of this writer. Next, I Hear Your Voice. Okay, had a typical murderer out for revenge as the big bad. Which was okay, very cliche, very straightforward, very 2013, I let it slide. They tried to humanize him at the end to add some flavor, but it wasn't too effective. It's like, okay, cool, your family died because of Suha's dad, something like that, and you killed him for revenge. But you were the real victim all this time. Like, okay. Eh, not the best. Uh, my problem with him was that he was just a looming threat throughout the show. But he could have been taken out and this show would still function somehow. Right? There are so many ways to rewrite this show to make it better and still maintain, the few good things about it. And Pinocchio is the least good, the worst big bad, because there wasn't really a big bad. Right? The way that Yubom was constantly the threat, or not really the threat, but kind of the malicious figure that was after Jae-chan or was antagonizing Jae-chan. And then, of course, and I hear your voice, there is a looming threat of a killer coming after you. But in Pinocchio, just kind of came out at the last case, the last story. In a way, the real enemy here is capitalism. And it is the media's duty and responsibility to enlighten the masses and the privileged who are benefiting from the systems in place. And the media must empower them to turn against those in power. I don't know, man. That seems like a very interesting moral lesson with the big bad that is, a rich CEO, and the person that kind of brings her demise is her own son, who she spoiled and loved and cared for and was raised, with a silver spoon in his mouth. And he was the only one who could, blow the whistle on her and bring her down. Fascinating. Fascinating moral implications of that. Moving on. I think what makes Park Hye Ryun's show so widely popular and appealing to many people is because they're easy to pick up. Right? You can just get absorbed in what's going on and the mystery or the looming threat and not think about the characters as much. It's a plot-based, plot-heavy show. And as you may have noticed, I didn't mention startup all that much. I talked about this in my formulaic K-dramas episode, but Park Hye Ryun tried to change up her formula with startup. And, it's with varying success. In startup, she removed the big bad and the fantasy aspect. So now, we can focus on the plot and the characters. But really, the plot is the big bad and how the fantasy aspect affects their lives. So, since there's none of that, there's no threat against them even, not even poverty, I'm telling you. Now that there's really not much plot, everything is determined by the characters. And this is where Park Hye Ryun's weaknesses start showing. So note about startup. I only properly watched until like episode 6, and then I skipped through many scenes from like episode 7 to 10-ish, and then I just watched, quote unquote, the show through Twitter in the last episodes of it. So my description cannot be too detailed. It is impossible for me. But yeah, let's go through these characters and why they were not as effective as they should have been to, carry a character-driven show. Dalmi. What is Dalmi's initial motivation? To spite her sister and to prove her wrong because, Injae chose her mom instead of their dad. Before you say it, no, it's not really about pursuing her dream to become a CEO because, the thing that finally spurs her into action is the opportunity to spite her sister. And then when she gets into Sandbox and all that, then she starts facing obstacles because that's when she realized that she's not qualified to be a CEO. But who solves that for her? Who solves all her problems? On the management side, Ji Pyong advises her on everything. She asks 400 questions, she becomes a question bomber, and he answers each of them because he has eternal patience and he's stupid. On the operations side, the tech side, where Dalmi truly cannot do anything about it, Dosan takes care of everything with his magic hands. Not even his team, just him and his magic hands. And then when they finally decide on their app, she still has to go against her sister and win against her because they're developing kind of similar technology for different products. And I don't really know if she grew past that spite until, her incompetence led to their company being broken up, which, by the way, came from pettiness, right? I'm pretty sure it came from pettiness because they chose not to listen to Ji Pyong. Either her or Dosan. I don't know, something about that. But yeah, that happened. It was definitely their fault. And then we, after the time skip, after everything, we didn't even see her properly mend her relationship with Injay because, yeah, it would just happen in the time skip. Suddenly she started working for her sister. I don't know, man. It is the fault. I do have some faults here because I didn't fully watch the show. But still, I'm pretty sure I'm not completely off, okay, with how I assessed her. Next, Dosan. What's Dosan's motivation? Dalmi. Yep, Dalmi is his dream. I mean, yeah, okay. He had like imposter syndrome issues, and the company that his parents had been like sponsoring and paying for wasn't achieving anything. But like, what actually dragged him into the plot of the show? He fell in love at first sight, and after reading Dalmi's letters to Ji Pyong, who was pretending to be him because of Halmuni's request, like, oh, gosh, what a very convoluted story. But, that's when he agreed to participate in a lie. And then, he and Ji Pyong kind of alternated on who wanted to stop lying and who wanted to keep the lie going. Dosan chose to work with Dalmi, when they were building their team for the hackathon, even if she was an unqualified CEO and his team really needed the help of someone more competent because he did not win the lottery to become a CEO. He couldn't spot trends fast enough, okay? Because that's all a CEO needs to do. He was not fit to be a CEO and they needed someone more competent because they had good tech, but they didn't have the leadership to make it work, but they chose her over Injay, who was propositioning them. And why? Why did he do that? He would say, why can't I? Because why can't a person be your dream? My God, do I need to explain how weak that motivation is? Do I need to? Right? If you say it out loud, what the hell, man? But of course, like after they split up in the time skip, and then he comes back rich, suddenly all his internal issues are gone. He's so confident. He doesn't need Dalmi anymore. But, because he does. Because Dalmi is his dream. So, of course, he has to, swoop to her rescue when she begs him. Gosh. I don't know, man. I don't know. It frustrates me because they had these separate issues apart from their relationship with each other, which could have given them a lot more depth, especially in the very draggy second half of the show. But they chose to skip that development with the time skip. It's like, maybe they addressed some of those things in like the first half of the show until the time skip. But like past the time skip, it was too late. Like there was no saving this show because you skipped past all the internal issues that really did need some addressing. Like it would have been great to see that fixed. And instead, it was just about the love triangle, the romance, them getting back together. I just expected a more character-driven show to have more substantial characterization than this. This show it's uplifting to some people, right? I mentioned that. But I'm not encouraged by stories of people's problems falling apart with a touch. Because, like, that's not gonna happen to me. My problems aren't going to be solved magically. by becoming a CEO, by having people solve things for me, by having magic hands, by having a time skip. If I could, like, snap and make a time skip happen in my life, I would do it. But that's just not real, okay? And honestly, I think the uplifting, feel good vibe of the show that a lot of people are mentioning, I think it's just coming from the cinematography and the music, which are really great. I really love Oh Chung-wan. Great director. Also, the director of While You Were Sleeping, he wasn't as good this time, but in Hotel de Luna and Startup, great music, great cinematography. But see, that's all on the great director and not the writer. So, here we are. Personal ranking wise, I'd say my top is I Hear Your Voice, then While You Were Sleeping, then Pinocchio, then Startup. Okay, although I Hear Your Voice is very dated, had a cliche killer villain, had the worst Lee Jong Suk lead, had a Nuna romance, it got extended and became draggy, and among all its other flaws, it gets credit for me for being the first and for PHR having less practice. Also had the best female lead who isn't picture perfect, isn't always morally right, and doesn't even want to be sometimes. And she doesn't have the best relationship with her mom or her parent figure. I loved how she dealt with her moral dilemmas and continued to mess up sometimes, but grew to be a better lawyer eventually. Second, While You Were Sleeping, it's objectively the best. It has some good moments. Like, I could say I was invested, I was into it. And it had a little bit of everything, right? But because it was doing so much and was a lot more polished than the earlier works, it was like a watered down version of both, right? And to me, it was overhyped. Not as special, as amazing as I thought it would be, especially given how much I know about PHR's other works. Third, Pinocchio. It was not great. It was a little ridiculous, but it definitely had some of the best moral lessons, moral takeaways. It was the least memorable, definitely. But having 20 episodes did not help, right? It had, like, I think it's because I Hear Your Voice had such high ratings, and like Park Hye Ryun was doing really well in SBS, and they gave her 20 episodes and it became that. Yeah. I mean, I did like how the initial overly dramatic struggle of Dalpo is tied into the moral of the story. It wasn't just like drama for the sake of drama. Like, it did go back and resolve that ish. I don't know. And lastly, Startup. Startup only had its characters to count on, but there were no real stakes. They had questionable motives, and their development wasn't even shown on screen. So, I don't know, man. It also wasted its best character on a love triangle instead of giving him the development he needed and deserved. I think people would have wanted to see him make friends to adjust, right? And if this were not like a lame triangle that lasted for years, then he would have genuinely gotten that. So that's it for me today. In my K-drama criteria sheet, I said that I had no emotional investment in While You Were Sleeping, and it didn't have any extremely positive aspect. But I considered it mostly positive, and I would, treat it as a general recommendation. It's a typical cliche K-drama that would be a decent starter. Similar to Hotel de Luna, how I see Hotel de Luna. It's like, it's not the best, but I think people would enjoy it. My problem is that, While You Were Sleeping is just so cliche and basic, and it might worsen the stereotype that all K-dramas are tropey, shallow, and just convenient, right? Overly convenient. It's a decent start. It wouldn't be the worst K-drama to start with, but we can do better and recommend better shows that don't play to that stereotype. You may say, that I am looking too deeply into shows that aren't that deep. And to that, I say, yeah, yes, I am. But dude, I have a podcast. What else am I supposed to do? Right? Gosh, let me. Okay, it's all I could do. I couldn't stop thinking about the other shows as I was watching this show. So it comes with the job. I have, concluded though that I am not the audience for these kinds of shows. I mean, I've concluded that long ago. I should have concluded that long ago, but I wanted to have the full picture, to have my final verdict. So you may also ask, are you still going to watch the next PHR drama? Yeah. Yeah, I would. As long as it's not Suzy or Lee Jong Suk. Because I think there are some good themes, good plot lines, moments, characters, relationships at times, right? They just never come together to make like a full drama that I'm really happy with, that doesn't just play to PHR's strengths or her tropes. I'm hopeful though, because she's starting to break away from some of her cliches. And hopefully that continues and she, doesn't get spooked by the response to start up. Like, hopefully it's a learning experience because, she still made money from it somehow. And yeah, that's it. That's all I can say. I've said so much. I've watched so many shows. I am so tired. Goodbye. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you soon. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to leave a comment, like, subscribe, follow, and tell me what you thought about today's episode. See you soon!